Happy weekend, it's Patrick here. This will be my first clone shootout. We've got Naxos today. I don't have any Naxos clones, but I do have the OG today. My friends were fortunate enough to let me go ahead and get their Rayhann Italia and then Ateeq Nusuk as well. All right, we'll go Naxos first. We got Italia next, and then lastly, Ateeq Nusuk. All right, I'll just go ahead and give a sniff and then give some impressions. All right, right off the bat, the opening to Naxos is definitely the most appealing to me as you get more citrus. And that citrus that they use for some reason is just harder to achieve in a lot of the dupes. At least I've tried these, and I've seen people online talk about other alternatives. Same thing, that essence is a little bit difficult to achieve. And really, to me, this makes the fragrance start to lean more towards gourmand versus a modern barbershop. I think really what the inspired buys are doing is focusing more on the honey itself versus some of the other layers that you get within the opening. Another difference too would be the lavender. I would say the amount has been adjusted accordingly based on kind of what they were going for. The Rayhann maybe has a little bit more than the Nusuk, but Nusuk's definitely leaning very heavy into the honey accord. Again, like I said, pushing it into the gourmand territory. I would say to further preface that, Nusuk is also using less tobacco, I would say, or, a different type of tobacco accord that it comes off more subtle. So yeah, again, that's reinforcing the idea of honey. Let's check out the Rayhann in terms of tobacco as well. Okay, again, a little more prominent than Nusuk for sure on the Rayhann Italia, but definitely the Naxos has the most prominent tobacco. But that being said, it is a blonde tobacco or something more mild to begin with. But it is interesting how, in the Xerjoff version, you're getting a nice delicate balance of prominence to where, you notice it. But again, the accord itself is still finely tuned to be light and complement the honey lavender citrus combination. I will say that I do enjoy all three of these, but I am trying to be as objective as possible in terms of the representation of Naxos. I've heard a lot of people say that, when it comes to clones, they actually like when there's more of a twist on the clone. It kind of makes you feel like you could perhaps own both the original and the clone. So that's something to keep in mind if you're shopping around. In this case, I'm just trying to compare more on the side of like quality and accuracy to the accords of the original. I would say another big difference as well is the honey accord itself seems composed slightly different between all three. This is a very interesting test because, like I said, I've never done a comparison side by side like this. And so I think that's exaggerating my results even more just because they are all back to back. I'm able to smell them all. But I would say the Naxos notes, just come over more consistent when it comes to the honey versus Rayhann and Nusuk. They have a little bit of a difference as time goes on. The honey accord is shifting. It feels less consistent in its presentation, essentially. I think I've, done a decent job evaluating on strip. We should probably do skin as well. So let me just give you a few notes on skin. I should have enough spots on me to get all three on. Got Italia on my right arm. Left arm is Xerjoff Naxos. My right inner elbow's got the Nusuk. On skin is a very different story. I think some of the nuances are harder to find actually versus on stripped. But most notable changes are going to be the emphasis on honey with the two clones versus more tobacco, more lavender. And then once again, that signature citrus is just a little bit hard to detect. If it is there, it's much different in its formulation, I would say. All of this being said, I really think that in a test environment, everything is just more sensitive because, I'm literally doing everything side by side. So maybe that, that's a good way to represent each of these fragrances. But at the end of the day, I think it would be a lot harder to tell the differences, if you just have one of them. If you just had Italia or Nusuk, maybe some of the other inspired buys as well. So definitely keep that in mind. Don't let the differences I've noted, sway you from buying these. They're at such a great price point. It's very hard to not feel as though you want to get into these. Regarding price point, the cheapest that I was able to purchase was at about $130 after tax and everything. Both of my friends, I believe Italia was around 30 or so, and my friend got Nusuk Ateeq Nusuk right when it came out, so it was pushing 40 for sure, but I would say that's also dropped in price, probably sub 30 by now as well. Rayhann, the price kind of goes up and down, at least sub 40 for sure you could grab it. The final takeaway for me is really that the inspired buys feel a little less dense, just because they're less focused on lavender and tobacco in the entire formula. So it's really pushing more of a honey fragrance to me. But they still get the job, they still get the DNA accomplished for sure. There's just some subtleties in the fragrance that wasn't really their goal. And arguably you could say that they made them this way because they are more mass appealing now. I would say even though Naxos is one of the best sellers from Xerjoff, if not the top seller, you know, it still has a niche nuance about it. And I know some people aren't really crazy about lavender, citrus, and honey together. So, you know, maybe that was a goal in itself, pushing into being more mass appealing, as you know, that's kind of the whole goal of a lot of these Middle Eastern companies. So it makes sense from, you know, their sales standpoint and their strategy standpoint. Of course, it's going to feel more premium with the higher price point, but you know, honestly, for what Nusuk and Rayhann achieved, I think they did a great job in terms of, you know, working with the specific budget that they have. All in all, the inspired buys we looked at today get pretty close, but you just miss out on a few nuances. And really, it's up to you to decide if that's worthy of the extra money or not. For me, in this case, I think that would be what I would choose. I very well understand the circumstance for everyone is different. You may just be getting into fragrances and want to spend less money. You simply just, you know, don't want to put that much money into fragrance. You know, I think these are both great options. But I did want to let you know the differences because there are some that are notable for sure. So let me know how you think I did on this review and first clone shootout, if you will. You know, I'd love to do more of these. Please do note, you know, all my tests on skin will be acclimated to me, you know, my tastes and how I smell. So just keep that in mind. You know, on your skin, results could be very different. So that is also why I put more emphasis on the tester. And yeah, that was great information today as well. I found out on the tester, I think a lot more nuances came through. And so I'm very glad that, you know, I'm making that observation for next time. Just because, you know, it is important to test on skin. That's more personal. That's more for you. But yeah, the testers very well helped in concluding my results today. All right, I hope you liked the video today. Let me know how you felt, what other inspired by versus original you'd like to see. A like, follow, comment, any of those would be appreciated. I really appreciate your feedback and, you know, your interactivity with me. I'll see you guys in another. Take care.